Now, we made it to the third member of the underrated six, because there are so many Disney films I can call underrated, but there are times that these films can still be talked about by regular Disney fans. This next film feels a lot different since it did come from one of the roughest created periods in Disney's history, with some of their most divisive works. And because of that, this one often gets overlooked whenever people look back at some of Disney's best movies. And as a kid, I just thought it was good, but revisiting it as an adult, it entirely changed how I see this movie. Not only did it manage to hold up well for the marathon, it ended up becoming one of the biggest surprises within it, and that is Meet the Robinsons. Out of the three Disney films from my childhood that are considered forgotten, like Chicken Little, Meet the Robinsons, and Walt, Meet the Robinsons is easily the best of the trio. But the main thing that really surprised me with Meet the Robinsons on rewatch had to be the presentation of its time travel story, since the first 20 minutes do a great job at presenting our main character in Lewis, but also setting up the events that are to come throughout. And how time travel works in Meet the Robinsons was well written, especially in what happened to the main villain, but also how he managed to change the future by stealing the machine that Lewis invented for the science fair. The overall emotional core of Meet the Robinsons is what makes Lewis an engaging and relatable protagonist, even if he doesn't relate to my life. The only major issue I have with the plot is the second act. From the point Lewis and Wilbur reach the Robinson house to the point that bowler hat guy takes Lewis does feel like filler, but the first and third acts of the movie are presented quite well. The writing in Meet the Robinsons was great, presenting a wide variety of moments to enjoy within its comedy, world building, and emotional moments. The movie does have a strong message of keep moving forward, which isn't there for the sake of having a motto, because it feels earned throughout Lewis's character arc. The animation holds up really well, especially when comparing it to the film prior in Chicken Little, thanks to the better lighting, creative environments, and charming character designs. The futuristic city of Todayland feels unique, and the technology manages to stand out from other sci-fi movies, and the chaotic visuals are what give the Robinson household a lot of personality. And while a few shots, such as the dinosaur chase, do look slightly choppy on the revisit, this movie easily looks better than both Chicken Little and Dinosaur. The characters probably had to be the one area of the movie where it stands out, since Lewis is compelling thanks to his desire to understand why his mother abandoned him as a baby, with his decision to let go of the past and keep moving forward, making for a compelling character arc. Wilbur is fun, even though he doesn't get an awful lot of character development like Lewis does. Bowler Hat Guy is one of the most underrated villains in Disney, as his arc is surprisingly tragic, with a motivation that makes sense, and the voice acting is great thanks to Steven Anderson doing a great job as Bowler Hat Guy. And while the score by Danny Elfman does a great job at selling the movie overall, rewatching Meet the Robinsons for the first time in years, I was shocked by how better it was than as a kid, where I just simply thought it was good. But as an adult, I can appreciate how its story and themes pay off a lot more, but it just about misses out on the top 15 thanks to its filler second act and the slower third act. But Meet the Robinsons is a Disney film that deserves more recognition than it actually gets, not just by the general public, but Disney themselves as well. And that reveals the third member of the underrated six, and there are 3 members left to reveal. Speaking of which, now approaching the 4th member of the underrated 6. Even I was surprised that I enjoyed it as much as I did, which I did hear going in that this was an underrated gem, which in an era with the Black Cauldron and Oliver and Company, sure, I wasn't going to believe them, right? Well, the Bronze Age only had one amazing film in it, and this was it. And we have crossed the 9 out of 10 zone officially. Some of the best offerings in Disney. And while the 10 out of 10s are still a stretch away, these are still some amazing films that deserve to be checked out. And this one, just crossing its 40th anniversary, The Great Mouse Detective is one of the most overlooked Disney movies in the entire Disney canon, even to Disney themselves. I always enjoy detective stories because they are the one type of story that keeps me in start to finish, with the characters solving a mystery, and The Great Mouse Detective does deliver on that. The mystery that Basil and Dawson have to solve is well written, with new clues keeping the story moving. One of my favourite scenes to watch had to be the toy shop scene and the final battle inside Big Ben, which is one of the most satisfying climaxes in this era of Disney. One thing I wasn't expecting with The Great Mouse Detective is how clever its world building is, especially with how the mice inhabit Victorian London, which is clever with the human objects becoming a part of their world, which is a simple idea at first, but is executed in a way that makes it so compelling. For a film released in 1986, the animation holds up exceptionally well, especially with the character animation in the characters like Ratigan, and while I did notice that the outlines are thicker in certain scenes, it's a minor complaint. The use of CG during the Big Ben climax was ambitious for 1986, and the moving gears make this one of the most exciting action climaxes before the Disney Renaissance. The pacing was excellent, which coming off the Black Cauldron the year prior, which I really felt the runtime there, and I wanted it to be over so bad. But The Great Mouse Detective was the opposite, because I was heavily invested in the mystery that I never thought how long was actually left in the movie when watching this. And everything manages to move at the right speed without dragging for too long or rushing its way to the climax. The characters were another strength to me, since Basil is one of the smartest protagonists in this era of Disney. Which is funny, because the year prior, you had an entire ensemble of low IQ idiots in the Black Cauldron, and now you jump from a dumb protagonist to a smart one in the span of a year, which I hardly ever hear people talk about Basil when looking at different Disney protagonists. Dawson does start off as clumsy, but he does grow to someone who learns from his mistakes as the movie progresses. Olivia is someone who is determined to find her father, which does give the movie both motivation and a way to drive the plot, while Toby the dog, whenever he's on screen, is fun, despite the fact he doesn't talk. But the standout character of The Great Mouse Detective had to be Ratigan, which every scene he is in is entertaining, and whenever he is called a rat, the way he reacts is just funny. And this is one of the Disney villains pre-Renaissance with the most personality here. When people talk about Disney villains, I don't hear a lot of people talk about how good of a villain Ratigan is, which is criminal. The voice acting in the movie is strong throughout, especially in Basil and Ratigan, who have some of the greatest performance from their specific actors, who do have some great performances from their specific actors, adding personality to their characters, with Henry Mancini's score deserving more recognition as well. And even though I'm not familiar with his other works, his music does complement Victorian London quite well, while Ratigan's musical number is easily the best musical component in the movie. Considering that this was released in what many people consider to be one of the worst decades in Disney's catalogue, The Great Mouse Detective does prove that Disney can still come out with something amazing in between two movies, one awful, the other mediocre. And considering we went from a big critical and commercial failure in The Black Cauldron the year before, taking a giant leap in quality from that film to The Great Mouse Detective is a miracle, thanks to its excellent pacing, memorable characters, and a fantastic villain in Ratigan. But unlike Bolt and Meet the Robinsons, which I did watch prior to the marathon, The Great Mouse Detective I only watched for the first time for this marathon, which if you hadn't seen The Great Mouse Detective yet, I definitely recommend giving it a watch. Do you trust me when I say that both the Renaissance and Revival eras had 5 films in the top 15 each? Because if you do believe me, then let's fly to this next film, which definitely deserved to be up here as one of the best Renaissance films, which, although it's not in the top 10 because of a few pacing issues, this one took me to a whole new world, with one legendary vocal performance, an iconic soundtrack, and an overall clever film to begin with. Oh, okay, I've been stalling for too long, but now let's sing the song to reveal who this film is. Prince Ali, fabulous, he made it to 14th. It's Aladdin. You could already guess that. Aladdin does tell a strong story of how someone can grow from a street rat who has a dream of living in royal life before experiencing it for himself, which the Magic Lamp storyline does open up for loads of creative moments, especially in the climax, which the opening does do a great job at introducing the characters and Agrabah as a setting. But the biggest issue for me was the pacing, since we don't get to meet the genie until halfway into the movie, which does make the first half feel slightly slower, but everything else does help even out the pacing. The writing in Aladdin is excellent, since it handles both the romance between Aladdin and Jasmine correctly, and the villain in Jafar as well. Because unlike other Disney romances from Ariel and Eric, as well as Cinderella and the Prince, the reason that Aladdin and Jasmine work as a couple is because Aladdin dreams of living in royalty, while Jasmine just wants to escape her princess life and being in a forced marriage that she herself does not want to be in. And even though they don't know each other for very long, their chemistry still works because their perspectives contrast pretty well, and the humour does land well too, especially in Genie thanks to his visual gags. The animation is another big compliment for me, since the character animation is expressive, especially in Genie. The effects surrounding Genie still look fantastic to this day, and the personality packed into this film makes him one of the most expressive characters in Disney. And if I had to rank my favourite characters from each Disney film, even the Disney films I dislike, surely Genie would make it pretty high. Even the earlier CGI has aged exceptionally well, such as the Cave of Wonders entrance, and the sequence with the magic carpet is still impressive, even for a film released in 1992. The characters are excellent all over, since the way Aladdin grows as a character is satisfying to watch, while Jasmine's arc complements Aladdin's perfectly because their goals are the opposite. Genie, without denial, is the best character in the movie, with all of his scenes and his performance from the late Robin Williams being one of the best in the Renaissance. And then we have Jafar, who does remain one of the most powerful in Disney once he gets his hands on the lamp. And the way the final battle is resolved is satisfying, because Aladdin cleverly tricks Jafar into wishing him to being a powerful genie, which results in him being trapped in the lamp, which has to be one of the smartest villain defeats in Disney, which Wish 30 years later did try that with King Magnifico, but even though I just thought that film was okay, his downfall could not compare to Jafar's. The voice acting is excellent, which we all know that Robin Williams had the best performance in the movie, while Jonathan Freeman does deliver a great performance as Jafar as well, with Scott Weinger and Linda Larkin doing great jobs as Aladdin and Jasmine, with Gilbert Gottfried as Iago adding some extra personality in the mix. While I wouldn't say the music is evenly spread out like a few musicals in the top 10, but when we do get to the musical numbers, they absolutely deliver, which Prince Ali was excellent, but if I had to pick 2 songs in Aladdin to consider my favourites, it would be Friend Like Me, just because it slaps, and A Whole New World, which has to be my second favourite love song in Disney, behind I See the Light, which I can't wait to talk about it. Aladdin may have missed out on the top 10, but it's still an excellent film overall, since the story is satisfying, the characters are memorable, and the animation is gorgeous, with Genie being my favourite character from the Renaissance, and some of the strongest music behind the Lion King soundtrack, which all of this does make Aladdin my 5th favourite Renaissance film, behind the Lion King, Hercules, Beauty and the Beast, and there are Disney films that are designed for laughs. Ones that make you cry, and ones that make you wonder if it even feels like a Disney film at all. Because this next one is one of the darkest and boldest that we've seen from Disney, and surprisingly mature. And how in the name of Quasimodo is this even a Disney film? Because seriously, this does not feel like a Disney film, but it is. And The Hunchback of Notre Dame is that movie. And honestly, I saw that someone ranked The Hunchback of Notre Dame as the worst Renaissance film, and my response to that is, why? Like, what did you see in The Hunchback of Notre Dame that everyone else didn't? Because the story does tackle dark subject matter such as religious hypocrisy, genocide, and discrimination, particularly in Quasimodo, which does make for a compelling story on why you shouldn't judge a book by its cover, and The Hunchback of Notre Dame does handle that surprisingly well. And even if Hunchback doesn't take a fairy tale resolution, the ending feels earned because it shows that Quasimodo is finally something to Paris, despite how the rest of the city sees him. But my main issue with the story is how it's paced out, since it does take a bit of time for the story to kick off, since most of the first act is spent within the Notre Dame Cathedral area, and does take a while to get anywhere. And the balance between symbolism and the character-driven plot does work so well. And yes, even if this is the most serious in the Renaissance era, the gargoyles still add a bit of comic relief in there, which I do come to expect from other Disney movies, and they were enjoyable to watch as well. The visual effects in it were great, especially with the integration of a few CGI elements, such as the scale of Paris and the Notre Dame Cathedral, as well as making a few action scenes pop out, such as Quasimodo sliding down the cathedral, or swinging his way down to save Esmeralda in the climax. And I do love how expressive the character animations are, particularly in the gargoyles, and the fireplace sequence looked pretty cool, with the use of lighting contributing to an overall effective use of darker themes compared to other films that have released in the Disney Renaissance. And while Hunchback does have issues with its pacing, the editing still works since it doesn't rapidly change the overall tone of the movie. Because when the movie portrayed a serious moment, it stayed serious until the end of that scene. Thankfully, not undermined by the gargoyles. But if I had to change something within the editing area, it would have to be the opening 20 minutes of the movie, since it does take a while to get anywhere from the start of the film. Quasimodo does function quite well as one of Disney's most tragic protagonists, and yes, while I have seen this in Tangled with Rapunzel before, the reason Quasimodo's character arc worked so well was because of how he believed that Frollo took him in when his mother abandoned him, but realized the harsh reality in the final battle. And while this doesn't relate to me personally, I can see this being relatable for some. Esmeralda's witchcraft skill set was fun to watch, and even if Hunchback didn't go into the love story like most Renaissance Disney films did, she still worked as an interesting wife character. Phoebus was a bit generic since he wasn't given that much background, but his transition from helping Frollo to helping Quasimodo does add something which spares him from being a bad character. But Frollo, on the other hand, I already heard he was a great villain going in, but now, thinking about him more, he's joined the leagues. He's up there with King Candy, Scar, Jafar, and Hades as one of my favourite villains in Disney. All thanks to his manipulative nature, by making Quasimodo believe that his mother abandoned him for most of his life and keeping him locked away in the Notre Dame Cathedral for most of his life. And the fact that he got away with attempted murder, that is insane for a 1996 movie. And Tony Jay's performance as Frollo was one of the strongest in the movie, thanks to his menacing line delivery and dealing with the conflict around him as the film progresses. It really sells his performance for me, with Tom Hulce also doing a good job as Quasimodo, but the other performances, particularly in Esmeralda and Phoebus, didn't really sell me that much. Hunchback was not afraid to have a wide variety of musical styles throughout the film, not just within its score, but in the songs as well, such as Gothic, French, and the traditional musical style you would hear from Disney. And while I couldn't remember every song in the movie from the back of my head, the villain song in Hellfire makes me miss the era of Disney where the villain songs were literally ripped out of musical theatre. And to be honest, I had never seen The Hunchback of Notre Dame until visiting it for this marathon. And I can definitely say, apart from the pacing issues, was a great movie. It has a well-executed story, excellent animation, a menacing villain in Frollo, and while the songs I don't remember from the back of my head, they still function well into the story. I wasn't expecting it to be as dark as it was, but they pulled it off quite well. And because of the way The Hunchback of Notre Dame turned out, it was surely perfect as one movie, and should never get a no, that doesn't exist! But yes, Hunchback was great. Now, we're on to the fifth member of the underrated six. And this next movie is one that annoys me with how critics received this movie, because somehow this film sits with a Rotten Tomatoes score of 48%, while Dinosaur has a higher rating on the tomato meter. And I don't know how you can even manage that, because out of every film in the top quarter, this is the only with a rotten rating. Because even before watching this movie, I heard people say that this is one of Disney's most underrated, but I never grew up on this movie, so I didn't technically have nostalgia for it. And as someone who watched it for the first time for this marathon, I was expecting it to just be decent. But this was one of my biggest surprises in the entire marathon, with fantastic world building, fun characters, and the corner that Disney doesn't get into enough, and that is Atlantis, the Lost Empire. I was invested with this film throughout its entire runtime, thanks to one thing: its world building. If you followed this ranking, I love world building in pretty much any form of media, which is the one thing I look for in a Disney film. And even those that are not heavy on it can still make it this far on the list. But Atlantis, the Lost Empire does deliver on the world building department, as the story does involve a mystery surrounding the lost city of Atlantis, and the expedition to find the city, as well as the culture, makes the story compelling to watch throughout. And this is a more serious film than what Disney usually puts out, even with room for humor in characters like Mole. Milo and Kida do have heartfelt chemistry, specifically in the scene where Kida introduces Milo to Atlantis and the history of the lost city. The pacing is nearly spot on, with the campfire scene not really adding much to the story. The visuals in Atlantis look incredible, nearly 25 years after release. The blend of traditional hand-drawn visuals and CGI do make for loads of breathtaking sequences that were ahead of its time, with the steampunk-inspired vehicles, the glowing technology, and how the underwater city in design all make Atlantis unique from other Disney films. The lighting is gorgeous, especially once we get to Atlantis itself. The characters are another big compliment for me, since Milo is an easy protagonist to root for thanks to his determination on his mission, while Kida does play a big role in the world building, with other characters such as Audrey, Dr. Sweet, Cookie, Preston Whitmore, and Mole were all fun to watch, with distinct personalities, which all make the movie still fun to watch despite being serious in tone. The voice acting is strong all around, with my personal standouts coming from Michael J. Fox, Cree Summer, James Garner, and Jim Varney. And even though Varney did pass away during the production, the transition to a replacement actor is handled so well, it's difficult to even tell that someone else was in his place after his death. And the score by James Newton Howard is another massive strength for me, which I did already enjoy his work in Raya and the Last Dragon. I was not disappointed with his work here, with orchestral themes, vocals that add to the atmosphere, and a sense of scale that sells the stakes of the movie. Before I did this marathon, I had never seen Atlantis: The Lost Empire, but after watching it for the first time, I get why people defend this movie, because just like The Great Mouse Detective, this was generally an amazing movie that somehow had a lower Rotten Tomatoes score than Dinosaur, despite Atlantis being the better movie. And Atlantis does prove that Disney are capable of doing something memorable despite not being acknowledged by the wider public. And it's one of the most underrated films from Walt Disney Animation Studios, and the second to last member of the underrated 6. And with 5 members now revealed, we only have 1 member left. Going into this marathon, there were a few movies I knew were going to be in the top 15, and a few that wouldn't just find their way in despite only watching them for the first time for this marathon. And there were sequels I wasn't sure about. Disney sequels have been slightly mixed in results, with some being mediocre, some being okay, and some being decent. But this one actually did something that expanded on the original film. So when this one was originally announced, I was interested to see what this one would do. But I was not expecting it to be as good as it was. And I didn't think the most recent movie from Walt Disney Animation Studios would actually make it this far on the list. But it did. Because it was fun and is a worthy continuation on the list. And isn't an entire whole number out of 10 from its predecessor, and just about missing out on the top 10, and that is Zootopia 2. The story in Zootopia 2 does follow the fugitive on the run plot, which does feel cliche on pen and paper, but in execution is what makes it stand out from the other films that use that plot. Instead of being about escaping the ZPD, the story does involve Nick and Judy solving a larger case involving the reptile population that disappeared from Zootopia 100 years ago. This sense of mystery does give Zootopia 2 a strong backbone and plays as if it feels like a detective story, which I have enjoyed a lot in Disney, which is why The Great Mouse Detective and the original Zootopia, which is a few spaces away, ranked this high for me. Because I generally love detective stories. The writing is some of the strongest post-Encanto, with lots of jokes really landing well for me, especially watching this in the cinema where the audience did react to a lot of the jokes. The case itself is well organized, and I was always curious to where the case was going to lead us to next, with the world being expanded in a way that feels like it fits into the Zootopia world quite well, such as Marsh Market and Reptile Ravine. Visually, Zootopia 2 is just as strong as Zootopia 1, but what stands out in the sequel is how the visuals handle the reptiles, with each unique trait making for some great visual gags throughout as well. Gary the Snake moves quite well, and the reptile biology is integrated into how the reptiles live their lives, which is so cool to see, such as shedding their skin or losing their tails. Adding in new species does allow for some creative world building, such as the walrus being used as a boat, which does fit into Zootopia quite well. The pacing is solid, with the film moving nicely between investigation scenes, although things do start to slow down once Nick and Judy are separated at the honeymoon lodge, which the climax does take some time to resolve, but the climax is better fleshed out than in Zootopia 1, with more time for Porbert to be evil than Mayor Bellwether. The characters are still the strongest part of the Zootopia franchise, with Nick and Judy's dynamic feeling more developed here than it was in the first movie, with personalities that contrast really well, with humour and emotional weight to go around as well, with the new characters like Gary the Snake and Nibbles Maple Stick are fun additions to the Zootopia world as well, and are enjoyable to watch. The Linksley family work well as villains, and while not on the heights of Disney's best villains, they are still more fun to watch than the likes of King Magnifico in Wish or Narlo in Moana 2. Side characters like Flash and newbies like the Zebros do get enough time to make them memorable. The voice acting is still strong here, like it is in the first movie, with Kihei Kwan and Fortune Feimster standing out specifically. Michael Giacchino does bring in another exceptional score for the Zootopia franchise, with the themes we come to know from Zootopia already, as well as the stylism in there, such as the country themes of Marsh Market and the more desert-like themes for Gary the Snake. Even Zoo by Shakira ended up becoming a banger before actually watching the movie. Going into Zootopia 2, I expected a sequel that was decent but safe, but instead, I got something that has a reason to justify its existence, since it expands on the world quite well, and shows why Zootopia works so well, not just in quality, but in the box office as well, making this not only the highest grossing American made animated movie of all time, but my second favourite Walt Disney Animation Studios release of the 2020s, and the third to have come out after Raya and Encanto that I can actually say is great. But wait, if Zootopia 2 is not number one for the 2020s decade, then who is? Now we have officially entered the top 10 territory. The best works in all of Disney, which are up here because they all have what I look for in a Disney movie. Even the final member of the underrated 6. We are almost at the top, but before we can get there, we need to talk about 10 more movies. I can't believe we have gotten through 54 movies and only 10 more to go. This has been something I've wanted to do my entire life, to watch every film in the Disney canon, and now here I am now, ranking them all, from worst to best. No one in the top 10 was a first time watch, as all of these I had seen prior to the marathon. And number 10 goes to A Tale as Old as Time, Beauty and the Beast. I was invested in this movie from start to finish. Even with one minor pacing issue in the first act, Beauty and the Beast does manage to deliver one of the strongest romance stories in all of Disney. Even there are moments that do seem like filler at first, but are used to develop Belle and Beast as a couple, which does make their chemistry feel believable. And the way that Gaston is jealous of Belle also does provide a compelling motivation for him in the climax, which is a fun climax as well. The curse that was put on Beast is my favourite execution of the romance-driven story in Disney, because it tells the message of love being about who someone truly is, not by what they look like, which Princess and the Frog does explore that idea as well, but Beauty and the Beast does execute it a lot better. Belle does start off as someone who's scared of Beast, but the more time they spend together, the fear does turn into trust, which makes the romance so satisfying to watch. The writing is excellent throughout, and I can admit after watching it that after one meme going viral did make me cringe, but it is not at the fault of the writers. And this is when Gaston says he wants to have 6 or 7 children, which has become a meme over the past year. And I get it. This movie came out in 1991, and I don't want to think that a meme would make this one quote age pretty oddly. Beauty and the Beast is visually stunning with expressive character animation, especially in Gaston, LeFou, Lumiere, and Cogsworth, and while the musical numbers are excellent, with Be Our Guest and Tale as Old as Time being in my top 10 favourite Disney songs of all time, which also contribute to my 2 favourite scenes in all of Disney history. Even the climax has loads of creative animation, with the enchanted furniture fighting back against the mob, which is just so fun to watch. The characters are fantastic on both ends, and Belle is someone who stands out from earlier romances, since she isn't chasing a love interest, with her rejection towards Gaston and falling for Beast, making this one of my favourite romances in Disney. Beast himself does have some great character development in him as well. Characters like Lumiere, Cogsworth, Mrs. Potts, and Chip didn't get as much development as Belle or Beast, but were still fun to watch. Gaston isn't on the same level as Scar, Hades, Jafar, or King Candy, is still a great antagonist. The voice acting is excellent as well, with the French accents selling the setting and Beast softening as his character changes throughout the movie. And then we have the soundtrack. What else do you want me to say? Alan Menken crushed it with this film, with songs such as Belle, Gaston, Be Our Guest, Tale as Old as Time, and the Mob song, all making for some memorable songs. and I don't think that Beauty and the Beast has had a single weak song in it, which does make this soundtrack strong overall. And Beauty and the Beast may not have made it on the heights of The Lion King, but it's still an exceptional film, which it managed to succeed in areas Pocahontas failed, such as delivering an excellent romance arc, gorgeous animation, and a soundtrack that feels timeless. And apart from the first act being slightly slower, Beauty and the Beast does come close to being perfect. This next movie was one I hadn't watched in a long time, even longer than Chicken Little, Meet the Robinsons, or Walt. But revisiting it here, this one has what I look for in a Disney film. Memorable characters, a unique identity of its own, and moments that latch on even after watching it. But this film definitely had the guts to go the distance on the rewatch, and that is Hercules. Hercules was a Disney film I hadn't watched since I was little, but I really enjoyed myself revisiting it all these years later. The story works exceptionally well for me, blending in Greek mythology with modern pop culture, as well as some Las Vegas style elements, which on paper, this doesn't sound like something that should even work. But unlike Shark Tale, a movie I still need to rewatch, Hercules did manage to pull that off quite well. There are also a few ideas within the story that do remind me of later Disney films, such as Hercules being separated from his parents, reminding me a lot of Tangled, and Hercules sacrificing his powers to save Megara, reminding me a lot of Moana 2, which I don't know if it was intentional, but these ideas transferring to later Disney films could either turn out better like Tangled, or worse like Moana 2. I also just forgot how overall funny of a movie Hercules is, since characters like Phil, Hades, and the two henchmen in Pain and Panic all steal the show whenever they're on screen, which their comedic timing all works so well, and the humour does not take away from the emotional moments, which the big problem with eventually remaking Hercules is getting the comedic timing right. Visually, Hercules looks phenomenal, which the expressive animation, especially in Hades, would be something that a potential live-action remake wouldn't be able to get right. The glowing effects around the gods help with the visual contrast between the gods at Mount Olympus and the mortals below the mountain. And while the action scenes do have so much energy, even the use of early CGI during the Hydra fight still looks impressive for 1997. The pacing is another big compliment for me, since I didn't feel bored at any point in the movie, since there was always one scene I would always find entertaining around the corner. But if I had to point out one issue with the pacing, it had to be the climax going slightly longer than it needed to be, which, after the final battle on Mount Olympus, Hercules then does travel to the underworld to save Meg, which is satisfying but does drag on quite a bit. The characters are enjoyable throughout as well, with Hercules starting off as someone who struggles to fit in before growing into someone who went from zero to hero, making for a satisfying character arc. Megara was fun to watch, since earlier on she works for Hades and manipulating Hercules, but slowly learns to trust others, which makes her relationship with Herc feel earned. The supporting cast in Phil was hilarious. Pain and Panic work off each other exceptionally well, and Hades is easily a top tier Disney villain for me, with James Woods providing a performance that gives him so much personality. And the Muses were fun to watch as well, since they moved the story through quite nicely, because they had so many memorable musical numbers in the film. And honestly, I don't think Hercules had a single character I disliked. The voice acting was excellent, with Danny DeVito as Phil and James Woods as Hades, which helped deliver the two best performances in the entire movie. Musically, Hercules stands out from the rest of the Renaissance because of its gospel-style soundtrack, which does give the movie an identity of its own, such as songs like Zero to Hero, Go the Distance, and I Won't Say are among some of the best songs in this era of Disney, which Alan Menken once again delivers a fantastic score that captures Hercules as a movie quite well. Hercules is one of those films that honestly deserved a stronger reputation from the critics, that it did receive a good Rotten Tomatoes score at 83% as of the writing of this video, but because of its compelling animation, memorable characters, and amazing story, and one of the best Disney villains, which it may not be enough to pull off top 5, but top 10 will do for Hercules. Now we have made it to the final member of the underrated 6. As we've gotten closer to the top of the ranking, there is one Disney movie I found myself defending more than anyone else. And I told people online that I love this movie, and they always told me it was mediocre or a downgrade from the Disney film that was supposed to release in its place, which, in this case, Gigantic was supposed to be the Disney movie that was releasing in its place before Gigantic was cancelled and replaced with this film. Every Disney fan does seem to have that one movie they heavily defend, and for me, this is mine. Even after watching this 8 times since its release, my opinion has not changed, and I was initially gonna leave this film out of the marathon entirely since I knew my opinion was not going to change, but I still did anyway, just because I wanted to see how this one compared to everything that ranked ahead of it. And this reminded me more why this movie connected with me to begin with. And that is the final member of the underrated 6, the outlaw Raya and the Last Dragon. I think I might have to be the biggest defender of this movie out there, but that's okay, because I still believe, after watching this 8 times, that Raya and the Last Dragon is indeed a good movie. From the beginning, Raya and the Last Dragon does an excellent job at presenting the world of Kumandra and Raya as a protagonist, which are both done effectively in the first 20 minutes, which go through how the 5 lands of Kumandra all fought over the Dragon Gem, and Raya's motivations to bring her father back from the Droon, all without rushing things. And what made it work for me even more is the theme of trust and community. I know that some people may find the message in this movie to be simple, but because it's something I can personally relate to, which around the same time Raya and the Last Dragon came out, I cut my father off, which parallels Raya and Namari's relationship in the movie, which the scene where Namari betrays Raya and when Chief Benja sacrificed himself all hit harder for me on the rewatch, and surprisingly almost made me cry in the first 20 minutes of the movie, with Benja throwing Raya off the bridge was surprisingly more effective rewatching it for this marathon. Not only contributed by the score by James Newton Howard, but Kelly Marie Tran's performance as Raya as well. My only overall criticism with the plot is that Namari's redemption arc felt rushed. But outside of that, the story in Raya and the Last Dragon is one of the most overlooked in modern Disney. Not only for including one of the most intense climaxes, but the score by James Newton Howard made it anxiety-inducing. The world building is another big strength for this movie because it makes Kumandra feel lived in rather than artificial, giving each of the 5 lands its own unique identity, culture, and visual style, which, unlike other fantasy movies, every land in Kumandra feels unique from each other. The animation is exceptional, with the lighting and environments, as well as the fight choreography, and even the different creatures that live in Kumandra, like Tuk Tuk, Raya's pillbug pet, and this does help Kumandra feel more immersive than some of the other worlds we've had from Disney. The pacing was spot on with Raya's journey across Kumandra to finally eliminate the Droon, and introduced so many new locations, characters, and threats throughout the runtime. The characters are what help the overall experience for me, since Raya had to be one of the most relatable protagonists in all of Disney, outside of Hero in Big Hero 6. Because of her trust issues, which do influence her decision making throughout the plot, and Sisu is where most of the film's humour comes from, and can be emotional at times, thanks to the relationship between Sisu and her siblings, with her belief in trusting others. I also don't view Namari as a traditional villain, like your typical Hades, your Captain Hooks, or your Scars, but rather as a parallel to Raya, and their contrast is what makes the overall conflict of the movie more intense. The voice acting in the movie is excellent overall, particularly in Kelly Marie Tran as Raya, Gemma Chan as Namari, and Awkwafina as Sisu, which I know a lot of people have been complaining about Awkwafina in movies lately, but the reason Awkwafina's performance works here in Raya and the Last Dragon is because she does have a chance to balance out her comedic lines with her more serious moments, like in the scenes where Sisu tells the story to Raya about how her siblings sacrificed herself for the Dragon Gem, and of course the other characters like Tong the Giant, Boone, Noi, and her Ongis, as well as Tuk Tuk. In terms of the score, James Newton Howard does deliver in one of my favourite Disney scores within the modern era, which perfectly sells each land in Kumandra, the intense action, and the more lighter moments. My opinion on this film remains unchanged from release, but Raya and the Last Dragon remains one of the most underrated films Disney have ever released, with an immersive world in Kumandra, relatable themes, a relatable and likable protagonist, and one of the most intense climaxes we've had in Disney. And the reason that my favourite Walt Disney Animation Studios film of the 2020s is not Encanto or Zootopia 2 is because Raya does things that them two films don't. It has a relatable protagonist, it takes risks, and it becomes something that doesn't feel like Disney, but it is. But with my interest of Japanese or Asian culture getting stronger over the years, I can easily say that Raya and the Last Dragon easily aligns into my heavy interest of anime and Japanese culture in recent years. The release timing of the movie couldn't have been more perfect, due to the personal events going on in my life at the time, which didn't mean much at day one, but since I just thought it was an amazing 9 out of 10 movie from there. But after rewatching it when it first released on Disney Plus, after I cut my father off, I realised that this was the film that was speaking to me. The film that released at the perfect timing. I feel as if this is a movie that hugged me, stuck by my side when I needed it the most, and most importantly, it saved my life after my father ruined it. It's not just about the quality of the movie either. It's one of the most important films of my life, because if it wasn't for Raya, I wouldn't even be here right now. I wouldn't have that Disney character I could go to if I'm not in the best place, because whenever I'm in distress and don't know what to do with myself, I sometimes put on this film as a way to help with my problems, because this film shows me that I'm not alone in someone who has been backstabbed by someone they trusted. Kumandra may be a fairy tale, but how this film saved my life is the reality, and that wouldn't be true if it wasn't for Raya and the Last Dragon, the movie that made me take my first step after my world was broken because I didn't trust anyone. Big Hero 6 may have been important because it shaped who I am as a person, not only because I used to feel lost without a purpose in society and also formed my interest in Japanese culture and anime, while Raya and the Last Dragon became important for saving my life because of its relatable protagonist and the message of trusting others. I will never accept this as one of Disney's most divisive films, because there is so much to enjoy here, and I'm just the one person who is heavily emotionally connected to this film. So that marks all 6 members of the underrated 6. Walt, Treasure Planet, Meet the Robinsons, The Great Mouse Detective, Atlantis, The Lost Empire, and Raya and the Last Dragon. Going in, I was not expecting this to land anywhere near the top, which I didn't think it had the guts to make it into the top 10, given it had some serious competition, like Beauty and the Beast, Hercules, Raya and the Last Dragon, as well as the 6 movies that rank above. I always remembered it as a movie that was good, would miss out on the top 10, but on rewatch, it became clear to me why this movie worked so well for so many Disney fans. And this one is my sister's favourite, believe it or not. It's one of those movies that's charming, emotional, and funny. Even knowing what the story has to offer ahead of time, I felt entertained throughout my entire sitting of this film, and by the time the credits rolled, it all flowed through the hair pretty well. And the pun may have given it away, but the film is Tangled. The reason Tangled worked so well for me on rewatch is because Rapunzel's dream to be free and Mother Gothel's goal to control her to ensure that she maintains her youth, which is what makes Tangled both simple but effective at the same time, thanks to Mother Gothel's manipulation feeling unsettling without going too far. The pacing is one thing that does work really well, since it never drags or wastes time explaining how certain things or the world works. Even in the third act, which does drop the musical numbers entirely, which has been an issue for me in Frozen on the rewatch, but is still fun to watch thanks to the prison escape scene and all of the side characters coming together to help Flynn Rider get to Rapunzel before it's too late. The lantern sequence does stand out as one of the best looking and emotionally impactful scenes in the entirety of Disney. And you know what? This individual scene deserves its reputation among Disney fans. The characters are where Tangled managed to sell its core. Rapunzel is well written, and her being curious about the world around her, and while she isn't personally relatable to my life, I can see her being relatable to quite a few, thanks to her being manipulated by Mother Gothel into believing that the world around her is selfish. Flynn Rider also works well as a secondary protagonist, with his development mainly coming from different actions and dialogue, with his chaotic chemistry with Maximus, which had to be the funniest thing in the movie. Mother Gothel stands out as an effective villain, even if her long-term plan doesn't make sense. But her manipulative dialogue and how this quote, "Enough with the lights, Rapunzel, you are not leaving this tower ever," literally sells the voice acting and Donna Murphy's performance as Mother Gothel, and her manipulative behaviour all work and make her a memorable villain. The supporting characters in Maximus, Pascal, and the thugs inside the Snuggly Duckling do add to the film's humour quite well, and I did enjoy watching those characters every time they were on screen. On the technical and musical side of things, Tangled is strong. The animation is excellent, with the use of the lighting during the lantern scene, the creative use of Rapunzel's hair, and the visual gags that make this movie compelling to watch. The expressive animations in Pascal and Maximus give them both personality and makes the scenes with them included more enjoyable to watch. Alan Menken does provide a strong score to provide why he is one of the best composers in Disney. And the soundtrack is strong, with When Will My Life Begin, Mother Knows Best, and my favourite in the whole film, as well as complementing one of my 10 favourite scenes in all of Disney, I See the Light. Even if Tangled lacks songs in the final act, it still manages to keep its musical identity throughout the movie. Tangled was actually more fun and emotional than I remembered it being, but if Tangled missed out on the top 5 for 2 reasons, it had to be its pacing as a musical, which as a movie it's well paced, but as a musical, not really. And while Mother Gothel is memorable, her long-term plan in keeping Rapunzel to keep her young, not making sense. But Tangled is still an exceptional film, even if it didn't rank higher than the films above it. Going into this next film, I knew it was top 10 worthy, but I wasn't prepared for what one scene in this film would do to me. But on the rewatch, it's emotionally effective and well written, considering that this is from an era with 4 films in the bottom 10. This is one that is focused from start to finish, and does not rely on complex world building to function. Instead, this is a film that heavily commits to its character dynamics and the central message of Ohana. Or should I say, Ohana. Ohana means family, and family means nobody gets left behind. This is my family. I found it all on my own, which is broken but still good. And that is why Lilo and Stitch managed to be the #1 film of the experimental era and slipped into the top 10. The story in Lilo and Stitch is perfectly focused, especially when it comes to its themes of Ohana and the responsibilities that Nani has in looking after Lilo. And while the portrayal of family can be messy at times, family not being perfect is what makes this movie realistic, especially when Nani is trying everything she can to keep Lilo's custody and her life together. The sci-fi elements are integrated well here and never overshadow the emotional core of the film, but instead bringing a character like Stitch makes the message stronger. Even when comparing it to Encanto, the family chemistry hits harder here than it does there, which is why the message manages to hit harder. One of the strongest elements of Lilo and Stitch is the balance between the comedic and emotional moments. The humor is consistent, with Jumba and Pleakley being the standouts when it comes to the comedy, thanks to their personalities and human disguises, which have to be some of my favourite visual gags in Disney. And at the same time, the emotional moments got me, and I didn't see this coming, but the one scene that made me cry was the scene where Lilo and Nani are comforting each other in the hammock, which hits hard and is one of the most heartfelt scenes in the movie. Even with a few scenes I can describe as chaotic, like Stitch watching Godzilla on the TV and building his own model city for him to destroy, does add to the charm of Stitch as a character and does show him evolve throughout the movie. The pacing is stronger on rewatch than it did when I watched it to compare it to the live action remake, and the characters are what pushed Lilo and Stitch to 6th place. Lilo and Nani's relationship feels like a relationship you would see between 2 siblings, with a messy feeling that makes their chemistry as siblings more believable, especially since both characters struggle with loss and fear, that they might be separated if Nani doesn't make things right. Stitch's character arc is really effective, since he starts off as Experiment 626, who is Jumba's destruction-driven experiment who escapes for Hawaii and evolves into a caring family member in Stitch thanks to his bond with Lilo. The side characters are enjoyable to watch as well, especially in comic reliefs like Jumba and Pleakley, as well as Cobra Bubbles and Captain Gantu. From a technical perspective, the animation holds up well, with the watercolor backgrounds that fit the Hawaiian setting of the movie, as well as the CGI elements that, like in Atlantis The Lost Empire and Treasure Planet, blend into the movie quite well. The score by Alan Silvestri is heartfelt and action-packed, as well, in addition to the songs originally written for this film in Hawaiian Roller Coaster Ride and Himele no Lilo. I wasn't ready for what my rewatch of Lilo and Stitch would throw at me, especially with the hammock scene, but Lilo and Stitch was a great film that, even if I hear people talk about the brand more than the movie, the original movie deserves its spotlight. And even as someone who prefers Lilo and Stitch, the original 2002 movie, to the brand, go and watch it. I wasn't ready, and neither will you. And mainly thanks to Chris Sanders and Dean DeBlois, who went on to direct How to Train Your Dragon at a later date, they actually pulled it off. Going in, I had a feeling that this would be one of Disney's strongest modern films. Considering that we've had 4 films in a 4-year span in the top 5, which, believe it or not, I wasn't expecting this to hold up as strongly well as it did on the rewatch. And since I rewatched it in November in preparation for its sequel, and the reason it made it this far is thanks to its detective story, buddy cop dynamic, and social commentary, as well as telling a story about chasing your dreams, and surprisingly, unlike other Disney films where different elements fight each other for the spotlight, not here. While other Disney movies have managed to excel in different areas, this film feels like one of the complete packages we've had from Disney, and nearly 10 years later, it still feels fresh, smart, and entertaining throughout the entire runtime. And this is probably a rare occasion that we have had 2 top-tier Disney films in the same year, which in this case was 2016, and Zootopia, or Zootropolis, as known for me in the UK, is that film. The story is exceptionally organized, with the detective mystery surrounding the conflict between Predator going savage kept me in throughout the entire runtime, and the detective stories keep me in when well written. And what Walt Disney Animation Studios managed to do with The Great Mouse Detective, Zootopia 2, and now Zootopia 1 has actually proven to be the best detective story we've had in Disney as of the recording of this video. The themes of chasing your dreams, regardless of who you are, does continue to be a relatable theme in the movie, and the writing does deserve credit for how those themes are integrated into the overall narrative. The film also has an excellent balance between dark and comedic, which, based on my taste in Disney, is what I look for. And not once do either sides feel like they try and undercut each other, with characters like Flash providing some of the funniest scenes in the entire Disney canon. And while I was invested in the overall mystery that the film tells, it may take 35 minutes for the case to fully kick in, but the 35 minutes do fly by pretty quickly. And with how effectively the time is used to introduce the world, characters, and setting up the story, the world building is one of the greatest strengths of Zootopia, because modern movies like Wreck-It Ralph, Big Hero 6, and Raya and the Last Dragon are some of the best examples of immersive world building that we've had from Disney in recent years. Zootopia feels like a real city that does function outside of the main plot, with every district feeling like it has an identity of its own, like Little Rodentia, Tundra Town, the Rainforest District, and Bonnyboro, with the way the city holds these animals of every shape and size is cleverly done. The animation still looks great, surpassing its 10th anniversary this year, with great lighting, expressive character animations, and character movements based on the different animal species, such as giraffes having long necks, elephants with their trunks, and even the high energy action sequences throughout the movie and the animation makes Zootopia feel more alive than animal-led movies like Chicken Little. The characters are strong and help the film make its way into the top 5. Judy Hopps has a satisfying character arc who grows from someone who is optimistic to someone who learns that her mistakes are what help her improve as a person. Or should I say, Bonnie, because it's Zootopia. Nick Wilde does start as a popsicle hustler who becomes one of the most likable characters in the movie, with his backstory selling on the emotional moments quite well. Bellwether is probably one of the weakest of the major characters in the movie, because her villain reveal does feel rushed in comparison to Scar, Hades, or Jafar, but the supporting cast, such as Chief Bogo, Clawhauser, and Flash, make up for Bellwether being underwhelming, especially Flash being one of Disney's funniest characters. The voice cast is great and contributes well to each character, such as Jennifer Goodwin as Judy Hopps, Jason Bateman as Nick Wilde, and Jenny Slate as Mayor Bellwether, delivering some of the strongest performances in the movie, with Idris Elba as Chief Bogo, Nate Torrance as Clawhauser, and Raymond S. Percy being one of the standouts in the movie. Michael Giacchino's score does complement both the emotional and action-packed scenes, which help Zootopia feel exciting to watch, as well as one of the most heartfelt and intense within some of the darker moments. Meanwhile, Try Everything does remain one of the strongest Disney songs, contributing to the central themes of self-improvement. Rewatching Zootopia reminded me that the Disney revival from 2012 to 2016, with the exception of Frozen being a 7 out of 10, was one big massive winning streak for me, thanks to its clever mystery, exceptional world building, great writing, memorable characters, stunning animation, and a soundtrack that blends into the movie quite well. And it's easy to see why this made $1 billion despite not being connected to a pre-existing franchise. And if someone asked me to pick between Zootopia and Chicken Little, Zootopia is easily the winner. There are some Disney films that you enjoy because you find them fun. Some because they're emotional, and some because they are visually impressive. And this next film does exceed in all three departments. And going into this rewatch, this one already had a special place for me, but I wasn't expecting it to hold up this well. Despite being over a decade old now, this one remains one of Disney's smartest, most creative, and a movie that is emotionally satisfying. It manages to take the concept that could be reduced to just nostalgia bait and references, but instead turns into something heartfelt. A story about finding your place, and a story about accepting who you are, and that is Wreck-It Ralph. The story is one of the strongest in Disney, thanks to Ralph's character arc, with his desire to be seen as someone who is more than a bad guy in his game, which does make for a compelling arc from beginning to end. The themes of identity are handled exceptionally well, which helps make for one of Disney's most relatable protagonists. The world building has to be some of the best in any Disney movie, thanks to the secret world inside Litwack's arcade, which is also presented through the visuals, with every game having its own unique rules, physics, and vibe. And the script is consistent throughout, with a lot of funny moments, while also delivering the greatest twist villain reveal of them all, in King Candy, who is revealed to be Turbo. In case you ask Ryan Reynolds, I'm not on about you. Wasn't just surprising, but also set up throughout the film quite well, which had to be the chef's kiss of modern Disney villains. And if one moment hit me hard on rewatch, it had to be when Ralph destroyed Vanellope's cart after telling her that she can't be a racer, because it goes as far to tell us that he is trying to protect someone that he cares about. But my only overall issue with the script is the toilet humor, and that is literally it. Visually, Wreck-It Ralph is excellent, which Disney didn't just create 3 different game worlds and call it a day. They made each one unique from the others with their own unique rules and physics, such as the pixelated movement of Fix-It Felix Jr., the military vibe of Hero's Duty, and the sweet chaos of Sugar Rush, with all of these feeling unique from each other. Even the character movements feel unique, which does sell each world in Litwak's arcade. The pacing is spot on, with each scene moving quickly, with not a single scene wasting time or feeling rushed. And how the movie does transition between scenes is seamless, with even small details such as the CRT filter used to tell the story of Turbo just shows how Wreck-It Ralph is authentic to gaming culture. The characters are another reason that Wreck-It Ralph is as good as it is, with Ralph and Vanellope having strong chemistry thanks to both of their outcast backgrounds and their journeys to find acceptance in their own distinct ways, and their heartfelt friendship feels earned. Felix and Calhoun do have charm to them, while Calhoun was more complex than I initially remembered on first watch. Then we have King Candy, who remains my favourite non-Renaissance villain as of now, thanks to how entertaining he is to watch, and his excellent reveal as a twist villain. The voice acting is excellent throughout, with John C. Reilly as Wreck-It Ralph, Sarah Silverman as Vanellope, Jane Lynch as Calhoun, Jack McBrayer as Fix-It Felix, and Alan Tudyk as both King Candy and Turbo being my standout performance of the movie, with Henry Jackman's score is phenomenal here, with the score adapting to each world that the movie explores. Ever since it came out, I hadn't stopped loving Wreck-It Ralph, and perfectly reminds me why films like this remain some of my all-time favourites from Disney, even though the only element I outgrew here is the party humour. But Wreck-It Ralph checks all the boxes without desperately trying to, thanks to its excellent world building, fun characters, exceptional animation, and an outstanding score by Henry Jackman, as well as one of the smartest villains we've had in Disney. An easy lock-in for the top 5, but missed out on the podium because of the party humour. When I started this Disney canon marathon, there were a few films I knew immediately were the ones fighting for the top spot, when movies like Wreck-It Ralph, Raya and the Last Dragon, and even Zootopia, all fighting for it, but none of these actually did make the podium. Yet, we've reached the point in the ranking where we've reached the 3 at the top, the podium of the Disney canon. And I realised there was one movie that made me fall in love with Walt Disney Animation Studios in the first place, despite not every film being on par in quality. But this is a film that manages to combine heart, action, catchy music, and a strong, inspiring core, as well as one of the strongest protagonists in all of Disney. And that is if you ignore her arc in the sequel. Every time I come back to this film, I'm reminded of why this is one of the most streamed films on Disney+. And unlike Encanto, which didn't make the top 10 at all thanks to a few flaws, this one has actually earned its place on the podium, because beneath the brand and the catchy songs is a powerful story about finding who you are and who you are meant to be. And after going through all 64 Walt Disney Animation Studios movies, only 2 managed to rank above it, and that is Moana. Moana, throughout its entire runtime, had to be one of my favorite Disney musicals. Moana's character arc is inspiring and satisfying to watch, even though I already knew the Te Fiti twist was there rewatching this, and the story landed strongly thanks to the character arcs, and the emotional core is the strongest we've had in Disney in the past 10 years. Every major scene in the movie feels like it has a purpose to the plot, such as developing Moana further, expanding on the mythology, or going stronger with the themes of self-discovery. And apart from one joke I found outdated, the writing consists with a perfect balance between comedic and emotional moments, without either side being undercut. The scenes which involve I Am Moana and Know Who You Are being not only the most powerful scenes in the entire movie, but also stands with I See the Light in Tangled in my top 10 favorite scenes in all of Disney. And even rewatching it so many times over the past decade, neither scenes have worn off. The visuals still remain one of the most stunning visual achievements of the movie, with the water effects which look exceptional and give the ocean personality. The glowing effects on Te Fiti, the vibrant islands, or Tamatoa's cave. Each location in the movie feels memorable with gorgeous lighting and helps create the vibe that pulls you into the Polynesian islands. And while the opening act is slower than I remembered it being, the pacing quickly bounces back up when Moana leaves her island to start her voyage and doesn't ever lose momentum from there. The characters are another reason Moana made it to the podium. Moana and Maui are one of the strongest duos in Disney thanks to their differences with how their personalities clash, but how their friendship grows makes for some heartfelt moments throughout the movie. Moana's development from an island girl who is uncertain about her place on the island to a wayfinder who is confident, while Maui's development is shown through his tattoos being animated, and even the side characters like Tamatoa and the Kakamora are enjoyable to watch, despite not being on screen that much, with Ali Carvalho delivering an exceptional performance as Moana thanks to her powerful vocals. And Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson can feel similar to some other movies he's been in, but Maui in Moana 1, that is his best role and always will be. The soundtrack is phenomenal, all thanks to Lin-Manuel Miranda, which contributes to the strongest collection of songs in a Disney film we have had in the past decade, such as How Far I'll Go, You're Welcome, We Know the Way, Shiny, I Am Moana, and Know Who You Are, all contribute to one of Disney's strongest soundtracks, which the main reason Encanto didn't have the guts making it this far is because of the plot-related issues and one weak song. But here in Moana, however, all of the songs are strong, with the score by Mark Mancina being exceptional. And there are loads of Disney films that have become popular but just came out as solid, like Frozen, which was just decent, or Encanto, which just came out as great, but neither films in quality managed to justify how popular they actually became. But Moana, however, earned its popularity thanks to its exceptional core, stunning visuals, some of the strongest characters in modern Disney, and while the live-action remake probably will suck, as I have not watched it as of the recording of this video, the original remains one of the best looking modern Disney movies, and a film that easily earned bronze, especially as the film where Disney animation in the past 10 years peaked. But wait, there are 2 movies that ranked higher. These are my 2 favorite films in all of Disney, with one playing an important part in my identity and the other being legendary for its soundtrack and the best in the Disney Renaissance. Friends, I would like to thank you all for joining me on this journey. It has been a pleasure going through 64 movies, going through their most popular, their most forgotten, their most underrated, and the slop at the bottom. We have almost reached the number one spot on this list. But before we can get there, we have to talk about the runner-up, which, when this film is looked at on paper, it may seem like a simple coming-of-age plot. But in execution, it's far more than that, as well as evolving into something powerful, not just in the entire Disney canon, but in cinema as a whole, thanks to its themes of legacy and especially the circle of life, which all contribute to the best film of the Disney Renaissance. And the runner-up of the whole list is The Lion King. Simba's character arc is the heart of the story, since from the beginning, he is eager to step into the role he was born to be in. But after the death of Mufasa, and Scar manipulating everyone into thinking Simba had died, the struggle that Simba had to go through of running away from your responsibility or the expectations that people have on you is relatable, even if it doesn't personally relate to me in a way that Big Hero 6 or Raya and the Last Dragon do. But it's still an arc that relates to lots of people, especially for those who try to follow the footsteps of their family or overcome the loss of a loved one or someone that is important to them. While The Lion King isn't heavily focused on the world building, this is a film that doesn't need to be, because where the film stands tall is how its writing presents its characters and conflicts, which here every major aspect of the plot works and nothing's wasted here. Even removing nostalgia from the movie for 1 second, the emotional scenes hit hard, as well as the scenes which include Simba's return to Pride Rock, his final fight against Scar, and when Simba speaks to the Mufasa spirit, all remain some of the most powerful scenes not just in the Disney Renaissance, but Disney in general. Scar is also the peak of Disney villains, not by his strength, but by how he manipulates others, such as Simba and every other lion in the Pride Lands, make for a believable and menacing villain, which whenever Scar is present on screen, he is the most memorable Disney protagonist. Thanks to all of this and his top-tier performance by Jeremy Irons. In terms of how The Lion King is structured, the pacing is well organized, with the first act introducing us to Pride Rock and the characters effectively, with the story allowing itself to calm down with the introduction of Timon and Pumbaa, before going back on track to something heavier, even with one minor pacing issue with the jungle scene lasting longer than it should have. It does not take away from how well The Lion King flows through its story. The characters are stacked with personality, with Simba being one of the strongest and best written protagonists in Disney, with an arc that develops as the story progresses. And even though I have already talked about Scar on his own, he is a phenomenal villain in his own right, with Timon and Pumbaa providing the comedy of the movie without undercutting the serious moments of the movie, just like Baymax and just like Sisu. They work as comic reliefs quite well. The voice acting does remain excellent throughout, with Scar having some of the greatest line delivery in a Disney movie, with lines such as "Long live the king." And the late James Earl Jones does deliver with Mufasa as well. The Lion King is on another level with its music, thanks to the powerful score by Hans Zimmer, selling each moment and Scar's presence on screen with iconic songs such as The Circle of Life, I Just Can't Be Wait to Be King, Be Prepared, and Hakuna Matata, making the musical identity of The Lion King unforgettable. And this is one of the best musical offerings we've ever had in Disney, and not even Moana had the power to top this. When it comes to the first films that come to mind for many people when they think of Disney, some films like Pocahontas may not have deserved their wide recognition among the Disney community. But this is a widely recognized Disney film that has earned it, because this is a Disney Renaissance defying movie, thanks to the strong arc from Simba, and a film that remains a film that has held up effortlessly since its 1994 release. And this proves that even Disney films not adapting fairy tales can become as legendary as this. This is the Lion King piece of media. Not a Lion King media, the Lion King media. Because nothing else can top this. Not even the underrated Lion King 1.5. And you genuinely think that a film as exceptional as The Lion King would be the Disney canon movie to take home the crown jewel in all of Disney. But no, it's not. We have made it. The final curtain call. The top of the whole list. The one no one could have ever guessed would rank number 1. Well, family members would have guessed, but this is one Disney film that has such a special place in my heart, which beat The Lion King, Moana, Wreck-It Ralph, Zootopia, Lilo and Stitch, Tangled, Raya and the Last Dragon, Hercules, and Beauty and the Beast to number 1. But this is one movie I didn't think would become so important to who I am as a person until adulthood, and one that became a heavy influence towards my current interests like anime, Japanese culture, and Disney animation as a whole, which I already loved their movies prior to this one, but after seeing this in cinemas aged 11, I had a feeling that this movie was destined for greater things. It's a movie that made me laugh, it's a movie that made me cry, and it gave me a relatable protagonist, one of my favourite Disney characters, and a world that tells you everything about who I am as a person. This wasn't just my favourite of the entire marathon. This is one of the most important movies of my entire life. And no, I didn't pull off a hat trick this time and rank this number 2, because what you think is number 1 is actually number 1 this time. And my number 1 Disney movie of all time goes to Big Hero 6. Big Hero 6 is exactly everything I could want in a Disney film, because it tells a story that is heartwarming, funny, action-packed, and overall entertaining. The story is not some generic superhero story either. It's also a story about loss, learning how to move on after a life-changing event, and also finding a new purpose in society, which Hero's arc works incredibly well because it feels relatable to where I was at one point in my life. And while I haven't personally experienced losing someone close to Hero, like a sibling or a best friend, I understand the feeling of what it's like to lose one of the most important people of your life. Hero does start off as a gifted 14-year-old boy in the city of San Francisco, who does waste his potential on bot fights, but throughout the movie discovers a new purpose in responsibility, and that's what makes his arc so satisfying to watch, because he eventually learns that he doesn't need to be Tadashi to help others. He just needs to be himself, and this is the message that resonated with me and became an arc that latched onto me well. The writing in this movie is exceptional, with the world building of San Francisco feeling believable, with the technology, science, and culture, which all blend in to the setting to make it feel like a place with its own identity from other Disney movies. Every piece of technology feels as if it has a purpose within San Francisco. The humour lands quite consistently as well, with Baymax delivering some of the funniest moments. Funnier than Sisu in Raya and the Last Dragon, funnier than Phil in Hercules, and funnier than Flynn Rider and Maximus in Tangled. But what makes Baymax special is how he is one of the most heartfelt Disney characters. And even with the jokes that wouldn't normally work elsewhere, works here in Big Hero 6, such as Baymax deflating, which makes sense because it's tied to Baymax as a character. The emotional writing in Big Hero 6 is exceptional because of Baymax helping Hero process his feelings before the final battle, and showing Tadashi building Baymax was a powerful scene. And the scene where Hero yells that Tadashi is gone is the best scene in the movie and easily a top 10 Disney scene. Visually, Big Hero 6 still looks incredible in 2026. The animation manages to ensure that the action scenes are exciting as well as making any quieter moment work effectively as well. The way the microbots are animated, Honey Lemon's chemistry-based weapons, go-go speed effects, and every member of Big Hero 6 feels unique with their powers and how they move. It's not just the character movement. It's also San Francisco that feels alive, and vibrant neon lights, Japanese culture, and streets that make it all feel lively. The pacing in Big Hero 6 is perfect, as it takes the right amount of time to introduce Hero and Tadashi in the first act, the conflict with the microbots, and for the team to become superheroes, with the final act being some of the most exciting in all of Disney. I didn't feel like a single time that a single scene dragged, and not once do they feel like they needed more time to breathe or had too much time to breathe, with each moment feeling like they do something for the plot and the characters. The characters are excellent, with Hero being one of my favorite Disney protagonists because he grows with his experiences just like me. Baymax has to be one of my favorite Disney characters overall because he's funny, heartwarming, and inspiring. Tadashi does have an enormous impact even with the little screen time he gets, because he shows how much his relationship to Hero matters to him. The rest of the team, like Wasabi, Honey Lemon, Go-Go, and Fred, may not have as much development as them, but their chemistry that does progress throughout the movie is what makes them fun to watch. Even Professor Callahan does work well as a villain, with his motivations being driven by losing someone he cares about. The voice acting remains exceptional, with Scott Adsitt's performance as Baymax managing to capture his funny and emotional moments. Ryan Potter does contrast well as Hero to how he grows. Maya Rudolph does work as Aunt Cass, and while I don't agree with what he did in real life, TJ Miller had a fun and energetic performance as Fred. And then there's the orchestral score by Henry Jackman, which has to be one of the best scores in all of Disney. The music, such as the emotional orchestral themes, the electronic soundtracks, and the uplifting fanfare, that's what makes the score so memorable, because it fits with what's going on in the movie, and I can remember a lot about the score without even listening to it. Big Hero 6 is a movie that has never lost its personal impact to me. It held up really well on rewatch, and somehow became a film that found its meaning to me. It has everything I look for in a Disney film, such as a relatable plot, strong character growth, it's emotionally deep, the animation is excellent with phenomenal world building to go with it, and one of the best scores in all of Disney. And most importantly, it's a film that changed my life. It was one of the movies that got me more excited for what was to come from Disney the older I got. It helped me ignite my interest in anime, and beside Raya and The Last Dragon, has become one of my biggest comfort Disney films when I'm not in the best place. If someone asked me what my favorite Disney film is, it's not a contest, because after watching all 64 in the Disney canon, revisiting the classics, discovering new favorites, uncovering underrated gems, and talking about how much I defend Raya and The Last Dragon, as well as going through the slop, Big Hero 6 stands on top of all of them. Not just as my favorite Disney film, but as one of my favorite films of all time. So guys, what did you think of my ranking of all 64 Disney films? I know the entire video was 4 hours long, but With 64 films to talk about, I feel like going this long for a Disney ranking actually gave me a chance to talk about what I liked and disliked about each film. And looking back at the marathon now, I'm happy I've done this. And I would be happy to marathon another studio in the future. But the 4 studios that I want to do the most are Pixar, DreamWorks, Sony Pictures Animation, and Studio Ghibli. So, don't forget to subscribe to my channel, like this video, and turn your notification bell on so you don't miss another video like this one in the future. And it may be a while until I upload another video here, but I'll see you all in November when I review Hexed. BB8 out.